All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Q&A, product management business related. I hope I'm getting this right. It looks like I see Zara and Deep in the chat. How are you guys? Thanks for coming by. We've also got, actually, just to make sure that the sound is okay, because I don't know if my mic is working. Let me just check that. Test, test. All right, it sounds like you can't hear me, although my mic is not showing up that it is working, but it looks like it is working. So this is awesome. Awesome. Great. Okay, so we do have an AMA site on Slido where we have some questions and answers. Well, no answers yet, but I will provide some answers. So actually, let me drop this link into chat. And what we'll do is we're going to try to go through those questions and see if we can get some votes on them so I know what order I should approach them. We're going to try to stick around for about an hour here if there's enough questions. I think this is the link. Check it out, see if that works. Also, let me see if I can pull up my app for faster access to the actual chat. So thank you very much for being here. Thanks for joining me. We'll talk about product management. I'll try to answer your questions about the career, resume, really anything else that might be on your mind. We have a few questions that are already up there, and let me just set up my screen so that I can see your comments and also see the questions that are up on the web. So hang on just one moment. Bear with me. Okie dokie. All right, here we go. So thank you for voting on those. Please, do go through those questions. I'm going to try to deal with them from top. We'll start in a few minutes. I'm going to give folks a chance to just vote on those questions to see the order of importance so we can prioritize right off the bat. We'll do things the right way. Meanwhile, I just want to say thanks very much for being here with me again. For those folks that I already know and I spoke with Zara this morning. Zara, thanks for joining us. Deep was on our interview, on our resume session last time. Deep, thanks for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Your resume already looked good, but I'm sure now it looks even better. And all right, so we'll give it just a few more minutes. So the way that I want to approach this is I'm going to probably be doing a few from the site, from the Slido site, because it's all stack ranked, and hopefully you guys have made your preferences clear there. So we'll go from those, and then I'll be paying attention to the chat if I can multitask here a little bit. I do have it set up so I can see you both the chat window and also the Slido chat on the internet. Also, this is my first YouTube live. It feels pretty cool, but as always, I wish there was someone here that I could talk to. It feels pretty lonely over here. If you've ever done these type of streams, it's definitely much better to do them while talking to somebody. But until YouTube creates such a feature, we'll have to do it this way. There's also a suggestion to do these during Zoom sessions, like Zoom webinars, where we can do these chats, and so we might switch to that. But for now, let's start from. Thank you very much, Padmasri. We appreciate it. I appreciate it. All right, let's jump into the first question. It looks like the first question that is up on top is how to create metrics on your resume when you don't have metrics currently. So I'm assuming that we're talking about those folks that don't have a lot of experience or any experience. And there could be two cases. It could be that you don't have metrics because you don't have any experience or a lot of experience, but it could also be that you don't have metrics because you were working, but not really sort of oriented towards impact, not really oriented towards executing and hitting those metrics, because maybe you didn't set the metrics for yourself, maybe you didn't exactly weren't motivated or whatever it is. And I certainly can appreciate that. So let's take the first case first. The first case is if you don't have experience. So that's the easy part. You obviously look at the roles that you want to land, product management roles, presumably. Identify some of the key components in those in those job descriptions and see what they consider to be impact, what they consider to be relevant metrics. So is it aligning a team on something? Is it just revenue? Is it driving user adoption or engagement or some other metric? What do they focus on? And then try to see if you can move your career. If you don't have a job right now, obviously try to see if you can get internships. We talked about this in our other discussions, where you want to try to land these opportunities, either internship or startups or jobs that are maybe in smaller or mid-sized companies. The idea is that you start orienting your own activities, what you do around metrics. And it's going to have this meta benefit where you actually will start to think about, what is it that I want to accomplish today, this week, this month, next month, etc. Because you'll actually start to orient your own goals towards the things that you want to drive, the impact that you want to drive. And it will actually help you think clearly about what it is that you're doing. And also it'll have the added benefit that once you are putting together your future resume, you're going to know what you're going to put there already. So that's the case if you don't have any experience. Obviously, you need to go out. Unfortunately, you can't make something from nothing. So in the case that you don't have any experience at all, try to seek those opportunities where you can either start something, either a side project or startup, or join someone else, a team that's doing something interesting, or join a smaller company or mid-sized company, start doing things and start to orient yourself around those goals. And that'll let you create a path for those metrics that's a little better. In those cases where you are already working, but you don't have any metrics to show, there's two things you got to do. The first thing is dig deeper. So go back over everything that you've done and analyze the different directions that your job entails. Like, how did you collaborate with different people? What was the result of your work? And then if you still can't come up with any metrics, think about, okay, what were the actual actions that I took? And what was the result of those actions? Sometimes it can be difficult. And at the end of that exercise, if you actually don't come up with anything actionable, anything that you can use as an actual metric, something that you've moved, then it could be that you're unfortunately, you're just not very impactful at the things that you've done before. But that's okay. Let that serve kind of as a stark reminder of the situation, and start to tailor your future moves towards more outcome dependent plans. Have something that will drive impact. And by the way, if you today decide, okay, I'm going to try to drive impact next month, then in a month, you will already have something to put on your resume. It actually works a lot faster than we think. Maybe it's not overnight, but it is pretty fast. So that's my answer to the first question. Let me quickly scan here. Ali, you don't see on the Slido? Are folks seeing it? It looks like we have a lot of usage over there. So maybe just refresh that, or maybe use the link that's actually in my description. Try to see if that will work. Meanwhile, we'll tackle the second question. What knowledge and or skills altered the way you approach product management? Okay, so I think you should always be learning nowadays. The fact that you're here, I think, is awesome, that you can kind of see some of the things that I've done and hopefully leverage some of my experience for yourself. I think that's awesome. But also read books, get involved in events, and ultimately try to build stuff yourself. So I think for me, let me put this to the top so I can see it. And Sarah asked this question. Thank you, Sarah. So I think for me, the biggest thing that altered the way that I approach it is actual experience. Just because I've built lots of different things and have been involved with lots of different businesses and industries, it underscored a few key things for me, like the importance of execution, the importance of making decisions and decision-making velocity in general, and the importance of planning your vision and really outcome obsessed actions, as opposed to focusing on things to do. Think about what you're trying to accomplish. But I think that was largely forged by just my involvement in building lots of different stuff and being interested in lots of different stuff and lots of different things. The other thing I think is actually doing so many interviews. So because I've had the pleasure of interviewing so many different candidates, I've gotten the ability, or I've gotten the benefit of listening to a lot of different experiences and taking in a lot of the ways that people approach problem solving and product management and business. And I think that also shaped the way that I think about product management. It kind of underscored what some typical pitfalls might be in the way that people think and the way that people make goals for themselves or their products or their businesses. And I think that also showed me, sometimes the universe of what not to do. And I think always being interested in technology and just everything that's happening and trying to sort of stay up to date without necessarily becoming a master of each domain, but having a cursory understanding of certain industries, sectors, businesses. And by far, I certainly don't know everything, but the things that I have been interested in allowed me to get this a little bit of a broader view. So I think it's just being interested in general, and maintaining that interest and optimism, enthusiasm as much as you possibly can. And of course, getting your hands dirty and building stuff as much as possible. Okay, Ali, it's good to know that that's fixed. So Sarah, hopefully that answers your question. Thank you very much. Let's go on to the next question. So Reshma asks, what would be the general responsibilities of first-time PMs or APMs? It's a good question. I think that the actual responsibilities are very similar to any PM. So it's still end-to-end ownership of a particular product. But in the case of an APM or an early PM, like an early career PM, it will just be reduced in scope. So if you think about it, on the extreme end of the spectrum, you're thinking as the product leader, you might be thinking how to guide entire companies or entire industries forward, charting the path, figuring out what needs to be done. As you go towards the more junior roles, you're thinking about a particular product, maybe in its entirety, or maybe a particular feature area in a product in its entirety, or maybe just one feature or a set of features. So I think when you think about PM or an APM, a PM that's starting, it's likely going to be towards a certain feature or feature set that might be more specifically defined so that there's not as much ambiguity that you're dealing with. The idea there is that you still need to drive collaboration, alignment across your team and figure out the right things to do, but your scope is narrowed. So you're actually able to drive impact a lot faster, and it's relatively easier to drive this like cross-functional alignment. But the responsibilities itself are kind of the same. You're thinking about what needs to be done, why it should be done from the perspective of the user, trying to align the team on doing the things that are the right things to be done at any moment for the product or for the feature area you're talking about. So if you're talking about an APM or a starting PM, they might be trying to think, okay, how does this feature fit into the overall product or a family of products, and making sure that makes sense, that everybody's kind of walking in the same direction. Of course, you're writing PRDs, interfacing with engineers, probably not a lot of engineers, and probably there's not a huge amount of cross-functional collaboration, but it could also be. So it could be very broad right away. So the most important thing is just to stay focused, try to clearly define the area that you're working on, the limits of that area, and try to take ownership and identify what impact is for that piece, for those sets, for those feature sets. Reshma, hopefully that answers your question. Of course, there's a lot more nuance to it, but essentially that's it. It's the scope. It's the size of the scope. The actions of the product managers and responsibilities tend to be end-to-end ownership. All right. Any questions? That's great. I'm glad we're very organized. We have a bunch of questions, and I'm sure let's see if we can try to get through all of them. And thank you for prioritizing those for me. I appreciate it. Let's go to the next one. Rishab asks, what side projects can we start to get into product management? We'll push that to the top. Thanks for that question. It's a great question. There's a couple approaches to this, and I have actually video on the subject, probably multiple videos on the subject that you can find by just browsing around my channel. But I recommend doing a few things. The first one is solving your own problems, thinking about what you can actually build that will make your life a little bit easier, a little bit better, more entertaining, less painful, whatever it is, and see if you can just solve your own problem. That's the first approach. The second approach is how can you help others? And again, this others, it can be one person, it can be a small group of people. It doesn't have to be this gigantic market segment, because you are the point of this is to try your hand at building something useful for someone. So the second path is think, okay, how can I actually bring value? How can I help people, again, learn more, be more comfortable, feel less pain, be entertained, whatever it is, on a very, very small scale. And how can you do that today? Because you don't want these grand projects necessarily, unless you want to go into the startup route, which is kind of a separate conversation. But in the context of this discussion, we want to get into product management. We want to build side projects. We want to build something to show that we can be helpful for people. We can basically bring solutions to people's problems. So concentrate on that. How can you bring value? And nowadays, especially on LinkedIn, I mean, when you think about it, the reason I'm doing this is very much just to see if I can help any or some of you understand a little bit more about what product management is and how to actually break into the field so that we can actually build better stuff for many, many, many people all over the world. And so I'm doing my small part, and all it takes is just for me to turn on the camera, let you guys know, you stop by, join, we form a little community, and we actually try to deliver basically value to everybody in here. And so think about what you know, what you've experienced, what you're interested in, and see if you can identify any need. And I think the key thing here is that you're not going for big TAMs, total addressable markets. You're just going for, hey, I think I could be helpful to some of my friends or some of my colleagues or my coworkers or the people in my social network or whatever it is. And then the third path is actually identify some other people or groups of people that are building stuff. They're building stuff on Product Hunt, Angels List, Crunchbase even. They have smaller startups. You're basically looking for anybody that is doing a similar thing. They already have an idea. Maybe they've started executing it. I sent out very early in the morning today an email. And the bottom there, I said, that we're thinking of starting this product and startup accelerator show where we talk about, okay, what ideas you have, how can you best get started with them, what might be some pros and cons, some benefits and some costs. And we haven't quite launched that yet. It's coming soon, but I did put a little link there. So if you did get that email and you have some ideas and you want help with it, just feel free to fill that out, and we'll get back to you shortly when that show kind of kicks off. And of course, joining an actual company, so you can actually look for smaller product management jobs, internship positions, freelance positions, any kind of assistance building product. Now, the most commonly known is going to be web or app or some sort of tech solution. It doesn't also have to be. It can be physical. By the way, you can start a newsletter, an organization. Nowadays, everything is virtual, so basically nothing is off limits anymore, right? You could start a group about any subject and have Zoom video calls about it. So those are some ideas, and again, happy to if anybody in chat has some other ideas for how you can get started doing some side projects, some recommendations, feel free to just drop them in chat, and definitely would love to see what you guys think. Thank you, Rishad, for the question. All right, Phyllis, thank you. Phyllis, thanks for joining us. And Phyllis asks, how to secure a PM mentor in the industry? How would you want a mentee to approach you to develop a relationship? I think that's a great question. And I think actually the mentor-mentee relationship benefits both parties. So I think we tend to learn a lot more when we actually explain a topic. And when we explain it over and over, we get into the nuance, and we can actually get even better, kind of beyond. But to answer the actual question, I think probably you could definitely do the spray and pray approach, where you basically just approach everyone. But assuming you want to do this the right way and it's targeted, find some people that you actually genuinely like what they are about and what their core focus is about, and see what interests them and how you can actually help them. And I think actually, Phyllis, like in your case, I'm certainly always happy to have a conversation with you, because you've immediately and right away started helping me get this message across, and seeing how I could be more beneficial to other folks in your network and beyond. And so you approached it very much from how can I help you? And I think that's just an awesome way of doing things. And it's I think it's the absolute right way of looking for a mentor. And then of course, be reasonable and have the proper expectations in terms of people's times. Nobody really has time anymore. Obviously, the deeper you go into a career path, the more stuff you take on your plate, the less free time you actually end up having. So, for instance, I was able to sit down and have 15-minute to 20-minute conversations with folks as the channel was getting started. Now it's getting harder and harder to do that as there's just more and more requests. And I kind of want to be, my approach is I try to have as much scaled benefit to the community as possible. So it's starting to be difficult, but there's certainly, but I try to do it as much as possible still when I can. And so I would just recommend reaching out to people whose content you enjoy, who you think are basically in positions that you'd like to have, and surrounded by the people that you'd like to be surrounded with, and working for the companies you'd like to work for, etc. And reach out and see how you can be beneficial, how you can add value, and then go from there. And it should evolve organically. And of course, don't expect to always get answers. It just happens that everybody's inundated with requests these days, and so it could be sometimes your request could just be not seen. So also approach that as more of a marathon, and it is very much quality over quantity. You really don't need, once you find a mentor or two, some folks that you really trust and respect, that can really take you a long way. And I actually did not utilize this as much as I should have just along my career, and I can tell you that it definitely makes a big difference. It goes to like learning from your mistakes versus learning from other people's mistakes. If you can learn from other people's mistakes, you are definitely going to go a lot farther. So thank you for that question. All right, let me see what we have here. You're welcome, Rishabh. So Nori asks, if I launch an app or website, get around 100 users in 1 week, do you think I should put that in the resume, or how should I phrase it? That is awesome. If you did that, you got 100 users, yeah, definitely put that in the resume. I think it also kind of, you got to think of the context of what's happening. If this is, hopefully you're going to continue building this, right? If you have 100 users, I would say continue building it. I think you only need like, 100 true fans or 1,000 true fans or something like that to really have a sustainable business. So first of all, if you got 100 users in 1 week, and if they all left the next week, then perhaps continue iterating. But in general, I would just recommend to continue working on that and see what comes of it. Dedicate some small portion of your time and just be consistent with it. Don't go overboard for 1 week and then do nothing for the rest of the month, but just rather space it out and be more consistent. And again, see how you continue to deliver value to those 100 users that have already shown interest in your app or website. And for what it's worth, I think anything where you start a product by yourself or with a group of people should be demonstrated in your resume, right? You took the initiative, you identified a need, you built it, you've got some interest, and you're currently working on it. So I think, yeah, don't neglect to put that stuff into the resume and make that a part of your story that you're trying to tell, especially if you're trying to break into product management. All right, I hope that makes sense. Please let me know if there's an additional question on that. Sergey asks, how do you usually prioritize a PM? Which frameworks do you use, and how do you effectively orchestrate the trade-offs? Serежа, спасибо за вопрос. Sergey, thank you for the question. Let me try to answer that. So There's a lot of frameworks that you could use. Generally, I like to think of it in terms of impact to your bottom line being like your North Star metric that hopefully you've identified something that aligns with your mission, and over what period of time that impact is going to arrive, divided by the effort that it takes to do something. And then you can get a lot more complicated if you want, but it's effectively you're thinking of attributes of how you can tell different things apart, and then a certain weight to each one of those aspects. So in my case, you're thinking of impact that might have a particular weight, let's say 50%, and effort that might have a particular weight, it's 50%. And then you just scale them. You actually calculate them to the best of your ability, and obviously you're going to estimate here, and stack rank them. Now, obviously, in the real world, you end up having a lot of discussions because everybody has slightly different opinions. Your engineers, UX, researchers, your designers, etc., and like your senior stakeholders, whatever it is, you got to talk about it and see, okay, are we seeing things the same way? So that's another big piece of prioritization. Obviously, in smaller companies or like in a startup, it's just you. So you've got to always be laser focused on that impact. And for you, let's say you're the only one working on this, so you've got your X amount of time per week, 60 hours or whatever it is, and your impact is number of users that are staying in the platform, or revenue if you're already down in the funnel, like depending on what your objective is, then you've got to just strictly optimize for that. Ultimately, what are you going to get? What are you going to put in? And that's how you're going to prioritize those. In the cases where it's not clear, try to rely on the mission. Like what's the purpose of your company or organization? What are you trying to do for your users? What problem are you trying to solve? And it's not an exact science, right? It's going to require some intuition, but that's kind of the basic framework that I like to use. And again, happy to hear if you have any other thoughts on other frameworks. Definitely happy to hear them. And I don't know that there's a right and a wrong framework for this. Anything that allows you to get clarity on what you should be focusing on right now versus the long term, and align on that with your team is what you want. Sergey, hopefully that answered your question. And an important thing there is just to get going with that, right? Don't look for the perfect framework. I've spent, I think, too much time basically looking for the perfect solution in a lot of situations when the right thing to do was just to get started and get going, right? That like 80% of the time, just doing the thing, getting going, is going to be better than analysis paralysis. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, RICE, definitely. RICE and ICE are some frameworks, that I've certainly used in the past. Now, but I've kind of simplified it, like the I and E, the impact and the effort piece are like the biggest ones for me. So I don't know what would be the acronym for the thing that I'm talking about, which is like impact over time divided by effort. That's like largely how I think about it. But there's also like technical complexity, right, aspect to it. And ultimately, by the way, use what makes you more comfortable, right? Because you don't want to be trying to fit these frameworks into what you're trying to do, and it's not quite working. You can't quite get it. You're sitting there making these spreadsheets. And again, the best thing to do is just to get going. So I think you get what I'm saying there. Thanks for the question. Great question. Thank you. It's also very hot in here. Unfortunately, I can't turn on the AC because it'll be very loud. So, by the way, can you hear me okay? Like, how's the sound quality? Because again, my mic is not telling me anything. But give me an okay or not okay while I read the next question. Next question is, could you give an example of a good answer to the question, tell me about a time your project goes behind schedule and what did you do? Okay, great. Sounds like you can hear me. That's awesome. Thank you so much. So tell me about a time your project goes behind schedule and what did you do? So first of all, I'm assuming this happens to everybody, pretty much anybody that has done anything in tech or not even tech, really anything. Plans constantly go wrong. We're constantly behind schedule. I think that's kind of part of life. You obviously want to adjust as much as possible. And I think some of the agile methodology kind of came about as a result of the fact that traditional waterfall frameworks, you plan this whole thing out and it's like a year-long commitment and everything depends on everything else. And then by the time you're there, it turns out you have to go an extra 4 months. So like there's this unpredictability. No matter how much you plan, I know project managers like to basically tack on like 40% on top of everything after they've done their planning, like 20 to 40% just in case, because it always happens that way. But ultimately, yeah, a lot of projects end up going behind schedule. So if you can, the closer you can stick to agile methodology, and for those that are not aware, basically agile is just, it's an iterative approach to development where you try to focus again on that impact over effort, and you usually do things in these shorter sprints, like a couple of weeks usually is a sprint, where you try to get a particular piece of functionality and deliver it. Like ideally you deliver a certain design set of functionality or a piece of functionality over a course of one sprint, which is usually 2 weeks. And as a result of that, even if you're running late, theoretically the sprint finishes when it finishes and you can move some things on to the next sprint. And the idea is that as you do these, you start to get better at estimating, and you're always doing theoretically the most impactful work. But back to the question, I digress a little bit. Back to the question, what's a good answer? So first of all, a good answer is, this asks you about your own experience. You should always leverage your own experience, right? Don't make stuff up. In general, I think making stuff up is just not a good idea. First of all, because it's not a good thing to do. And secondly, because it's impractical. You got to remember weird loose ends. So always tell the truth. Then you don't have to remember any weird stuff. You just always say exactly what happened and what you remember. That's just general piece of advice. But an example, I think, like if you zoom out of that, I think it's a behavioral question. The behavioral question asks, okay, something happened. What did you do when something went wrong? How did you react? So I talk about it again in one of my, I think I have a video called something about behavioral questions. So definitely check that out. It actually addresses this exact question. But basic idea is that you want to, don't talk too much about the situation because it kind of wastes time. Rather say what is the it's the STAR or SAR. It's the STAR method, but I just go by situation, action, result. So what's the situation in very short detail, like the key piece? What happened? Clearly, this was already defined for you. Project went behind schedule. So what was the project went behind schedule? What did you do exactly? And what was the result? So the big thing that we want to focus on is that these things happen. That's okay. How did you adjust your future behavior to prevent projects from going over schedule? That's really all we're asking here, is that you're able to learn from your mistakes. So a good answer might be, and hopefully you actually, again, do this for yourself in real life, might be we try to do shorter development sprints so that we can better estimate. Or we try to have retrospectives at the end of each sprint or each development period where we talk about, okay, what exactly differs the most from actual to estimated time. And we try to identify patterns because some people have a tendency to overestimate or underestimate. And also some types of tasks have a tendency to be over or underestimated. So there's some certain complexity that kind of repeats. And so you could say that we looked for those patterns and we tried to basically implement a strategy that would adapt for those, that was basically solve for those in the future, so that we both tried to move the person or the type of situation that was happening towards closer to actuals, closer from estimate to actuals. And also we ourselves kind of behind the scenes made adjustments whenever we received an estimate for this type of situation, or from this person or from this group of people. And then slowly over time, we found that our variance from estimated to actual went down, down, and down. And so that's kind of the story that you'd want to give, that basically you learn from your mistakes, you tried to take an action to actually stop it. And then the result was that you got better at doing things on time. Hopefully that answers your question, but definitely check out that video. It goes a little bit more into details. Guthwolf, to your question, my general advice is just to avoid it. Avoid it entirely if you can. It's no good. Next question: is it okay to list title differently in resume? Product specialist instead of consultant. So this was upvoted. 5 people. I don't exactly understand what the question is. I guess is the question: is it okay to basically change your title from what it actually is? I think it might be fine, because you've got to look at what is the work that you're actually doing. Because again, I had the conversation today where the title is one thing, but the work actually is a lot closer to product management. So I think, by the way, product specialist is just as kind of ambiguous as consultant. So I don't know that it tells me anything more or less, one or two of those. So I would say don't worry too much about the title. Obviously, you want to, when you're applying for product management jobs, you want to get some actual product management experience, so you can actually put product manager, because the one of the key takeaways for when you're applying for jobs is that the job that you're applying for, the exact title, ideally matches the exact title that you've had in the past. That's just a general. But if it doesn't, then it really doesn't matter if you go product specialist, consultant, or whatever, as long as then your next step is just to show that you've done the things that you need this person that's filling this role to do. Does that make sense? I asked the audience, so hopefully that makes sense. Don't worry too much if you don't have a particular title. Don't worry too much about changing your title from one to the other. I think it is okay, but ultimately, if you don't have the matching title, just make sure that you have the matching responsibilities and action and impact-oriented actions that job actually requires. Oh, and Sarah mentioned SOAR, situation, obstacle, action, results. I like that. That's great also. So that's for the behavioral questions. Like, what's the situation? What was the difficulty, the obstacle? What was the action you took? What was the result? I actually like to add another one, which is like the takeaway, your learnings for the future, because the result was from this specific situation, but what learning did you actually take from that experience that helped you in the future? Maybe solve more problems or just be better overall. All right, next question. That's a big list of questions. All right, here we go. When there are 2 solutions, one that increases DAU, which is daily active users, and one that increases engagement, how do you deal with the trade-offs, and how do you choose or decide the solution? So solution, I guess you mean some sort of a product feature, product direction, or basically a solution to a problem with your product. So you've got a product. You could do this one feature or element that will increase how many active users it has using every day, and one that increases how much those users engage with the platform. So the answer, as always, is going to be it depends. It depends on what your overall goals are for the product and what stage you're in with your product. So for instance, as you're first launching the product, it might be more important for you to just get more users into the system, because you're trying to get more data. You're trying to understand what is actually important to users and what's not. You want them to go into the platform. So in that one, you might prioritize the one that actually brings more users into the platform and brings them there on a more recurring basis, so that our DAU numbers, our daily active user numbers, will increase. Because you can only increase the daily active users by increasing the number of new users that come in, increasing the number of users that come in per unit of time, so they come in more frequently, or decreasing the churn, how often they actually leave the product. And so that is going to be more of a top line funnel. So it's at the top of the funnel when users just coming in and you need more of them to get into the product. Later on, as your product becomes more mature, maybe you're going more towards monetization, or you're trying to perfect some of the features that users are using. You're trying to understand, okay, what is it going to take to get them moving all the way down to the funnel and to convert and become paying customers, or however you handle the monetization aspect. Then you might focus on engagement, because ultimately it doesn't matter how many users come in. I've learned that's the hard way on many products. It doesn't matter how many users come in. It only matters how many users stay as they continue down the monetization funnel and basically your product funnel. So if you have a more mature product, There you might focus on engagement or deep engagement, or already getting closer to monetization. And as you have a product that's already mature, you've already identified a product market fit, it absolutely satisfies the user's requirements, then you start ironing out the monetization aspect. Essentially, think of it this way. Your product provides some sort of value to the users because they're solving some sort of problem they have. You're providing the solution, and they get some sort of utility, value out of it. And as they go down the funnel of your product, as they use it more and more throughout, you start to extract some of that value back in the form of some sort of monetization or revenue. And so you're thinking about you providing value, and then you taking some of that value back in order to actually continue driving the company. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know who to thank for that question, but that was a great question. Next, how much do we need to know about Google products if we apply to be a Google PM? Unfortunately, I cannot say anything about Google, but I can say that if you're applying to any company, you should probably learn everything you can about them. Hope that helps. Next question is, what do you do when stakeholders have conflicting expectations and visions? Yeah, this is super important and happens all the time. I think from when you have a business that is just you and a co-founder and the two of you disagree, to when you're in a big company and you have dozens of stakeholders. And actually, Guthwolf is a VP at a very big company, and we're going to have him separately come in and do an interview with us about what it's like to have conflicting expectations and visions from lots of stakeholders, because I'm sure he gets that all the time. If he's here, let us know. Will you be joining us? Just give us a yes or no. So what do you actually do when stakeholders have conflicting expectations and visions? So ideally, and that's what kind of a big piece of product management is, you align all these different folks and groups of folks. And the way you do that is you focus on the product. Like, don't focus on the stakeholders themselves and their vision necessarily, rather focus on the product. What's best for the product? And of course, that lives with what is best for the users. What problems do users have? What solution is the product actually bringing forward? And because ideally your mission statement, your vision, whatever it is based on the problem and the solution. The problem being the user, the solution being your business or product. And so in your vision statement, you need to clearly explain what it is that you do very succinctly in one sentence, what you do and why it's important. And then get buy-in from all these other groups about that is the thing that you're trying to solve for. And so you can't really proceed until everybody, that especially the key stakeholders, agree that this is the vision. And if you agree on the vision, then everything kind of else falls in line, because then all the product backlog and the features, they're all done in service of the mission. So we have this definitely happens a lot when you have this, like I said, if you're just starting out, or if you have departments, like you might have engineering department, product, sales, customer support, marketing, and a lot of those might clash. So the important thing to figure out is, okay, what are the actual goals of the product based on this vision? What's the North Star metric? What are we actually trying to drive this quarter or this year? And spend whatever time is necessary to actually bring all those key folks in to get them to either buy in on what you think the vision is, or contribute to that vision and mold some sort of compromise vision together, so that everybody can get kind of aligned on it. And this is super important. We can have separate discussions about, like, you have different type of personalities. Some people just say no. Most people, though, when you're whatever size company you're running or you're participating in, will be somewhat reasonable. At least they usually didn't get to those leadership roles without having some sort of compromise. You know, there's exceptions to that, but generally they're going to be reasonable. So try to align them not to your opinion and your necessarily vision, but the product vision. What's important for the product? What's important for the users of the product? So that's a huge piece of the product management manager's work. And you should not be frustrated to be doing that. Instead, you should be excited, because once you get that buy-in, once everybody's on the same page, everybody, you're kind of firing on all cylinders, everybody's looking the same direction, and then you're not going to get any friction as you start to kind of push your solution out and you launch and you iterate and you do all this stuff. So take the time, don't be frustrated, and make sure you get everybody aligned. All right, next question is, how have you learned to be a good leader, such as learning about communications, getting the team enthusiastic, making the most of people's skills? Yeah, that's it right there. I think you basically said it. I don't need to really go into more detail because it's all about communication, driving and being enthusiastic, getting the team excited, and figuring out what people are good at and making them or allowing them to do that thing or group or sets of things and not having them do things that they're not interested in. That's pretty much it. I'm going to write that down because that's 90% of it, I would say. In terms of course, how to learn to do it is practice listening a lot. I guess I'm demonstrating it by making a long pause, but the idea there was that definitely think before you speak and assume that the people that you're collaborating with or working with have the best intention. So if you disagree on something, assume that maybe they're seeing something that you don't. Maybe their experience is telling them something that you haven't experienced, and so you can't immediately appreciate its importance. And just be respectful and be positive and be supportive. And again, try to see, just like you're trying to identify how can you add value to someone else, the same way as a good leader and manager, you're basically trying to identify how can you have that person be the best that they can be in an organization. I think you said it. But that's, of course, that's a huge topic, right? There's certainly a lot of books on communication, on leadership, and I can certainly make some recommendations of things to read. But I would also encourage you just to get started. So as you are, if you're starting on a small team, maybe your first employee or even your co-founders or your co-organizers, start collaborating with them and seeing start to notice what makes them be more successful and be more excited about working together. And people obviously like to be acknowledged. They obviously like to be complimented, authentically, not in a fake way. Their efforts, like I said, acknowledge their efforts and continue to route them towards the type of work that they do best. And I think this goes into the next question as good books, resources I would recommend. I think a lot of stuff on YouTube now is just a great way to learn about a lot of different concepts. So I can't recommend any specific channels, but actually some of the short form content where you can basically learn about sort of the high-end concepts about like communication, what are the different elements of communication and collaboration. You can definitely, I recommend YouTube videos. There's some, I think that's a great avenue for learning. Books, I think, are awesome. Obviously, I've always been a big fan. Crucial Conversations is one that I think is just a powerful one and a fairly recent one, I think a couple of years old, that basically it's all about the power of communication in personal and professional environments. I think definitely focusing on communication is going to pay big dividends. Communicating clearly, verbally, in written form, succinct, being respectful, having empathy. Empathy is a big one nowadays, especially. Try to put yourself in the other person's position and try not to have these immediate knee-jerk responses in general. Take a breath, relax, don't speak, listen and hear. And that's that's going to be 80 or 90% of it. But it's definitely a lifelong skill that you should always continue to invest in. It's communication would be my top recommendation for sure. Happy to go more detail into this later in a separate video. Now, share a little bit about Googliness. I don't think I can really do any Google related topics, but I think you should, in general, always just try to be a positive person and try to help people find what they're looking for. And just, again, be respectful and yearn to provide value as opposed to extract value. It's like this concept of giving first, it will come back around if you do it authentically. So good books, start from that one, for Crucial Conversations, focusing on communication. There's a few other product management resources. I will probably make a separate post about a few of them that I like. And so I think we'll cover that in a separate topic, but like the Product Management Handbook, and there's actually a few pretty great videos that are more long form about product management specifically. But start from those, and I'm going to write down, have a separate post about that. Thanks, Simran. Yeah, so hopefully, so that's how I learned about it, by lots of different experiences in terms of how I learned to communicate more effectively is lots of different experiences, small startups, mid-sized businesses, big businesses, organizations, different events, written form, like a lot of written communication, verbal communication, presentations, and of course, books. And for me, it's a lot of books and a lot of experience. And I recommend the same for you. Okay, do you think that engagement drives the retention? And does engagement also increase number of users, assuming that that it's a social network product? Thank you, Ali. Yep, that sounds good. I will put together either a resource or something about the books that I recommend for sure. I think it's a great idea. Thank you. This question about for social network product, and by the way, that could also mean like a lot of different things. Do you think that engagement drives the retention? So meaning when users are deeply engaged, does that mean that they're going to come back more often? I think by definition, it does. Does engagement also increase the number of users? So here we're talking about this virality piece of it, which is where, okay, if a user is more engaged with a product, they come back more often. Does that mean they're going to tell their friends, family, coworkers about it and encourage more users to actually adopt the product? I don't think there's a necessarily direct connection there unless that's the design of the product. So if the social network product is such that more engagement with the product means more invites or more hooks to get other people to come in and specifically new users to come in, then I think you could definitely tie those two together. You could probably conduct some straightforward experiments if this is for a real product, not a hypothetical one, and it'll tell you whether more engagement, if a user does 5 actions, does that mean they're more likely to invite someone that's out of the social network or not? And if it does, then yes, more engagement equals more new users invited. Now, of course, that scales kind of inversely. So as you have a bigger and bigger product, initially you might get more and more users, but eventually, as like Facebook is finding out, it's actually harder and harder to get new users because you've exhausted like a certain demographic, a certain market. But those are good problems to have. So hopefully that kind of answers the question. We did this one. I just didn't check it off. How can I be a standout candidate at the phone screen stage? Yeah, that's a great question. So I think of each stage in the hiring process separately, right? I think of it as a separate funnel, like again, the same way as you approach your product. First, you got your resume. The point of the resume is to get you the callback. The point of the callback is to get you the phone screen. The point of the phone screen is to get you the on-site interview. The point of the on-site interview is to get the offer. The point of the offer is to maximize the offer. That's kind of how I think about it. Of course, assuming that this is a job that you want and a company that you want to work with and all that stuff. But if that's the case, then the point of the phone screen is to get the on-site interview. So I would focus on, of course, nailing the material, making sure that you can actually cover the material succinctly and correctly and as broadly as possible, but also on multiple stages. Like some product management questions are very broad, so you have to describe them broadly and then narrow the scope and maybe get into each one of those kind of subsections as well. But on top of that, at the phone screen, I think it's important, especially if they don't see you, there's no visual communication. I think it's important to show as much personality as you can, again, authentically. Like if you've got to show your personality, you've got to be enthusiastic and positive and respectful and just a pleasure to communicate with, but you have to do it authentically. People can pick up on the insincerity very, very quickly. So that's what I would focus on at the phone screen, because it's very, very critical. It's hard. It's easy to lose it at the phone screen, especially because if it's actually on the phone. Nowadays, it's going to be on video conferencing. It's just a lot easier. Make sure you have actually a good lighting so people can see you. You're sitting in a comfortable spot. You're not hot like I am, because you're in a very hot room because you have no AC or whatever it is. But just try to be comfortable. Maybe stand up if you speak better when you're standing, that's okay. Maybe have a whiteboard behind you if that's more convenient. So I would say that's the focus. Really, personality is like this underrepresented component of the phone interview and also the on-site, but less so. For the on-site, you've got multiple interviewers usually. And so while personality is certainly important, it's not going to win the day. Your knowledge of the content and being excellent at what you do combined with personality is going to win the day. But at the phone screen, the personality could be this piece that gets you to the next level. And again, if we're thinking about it as a funnel, you don't need to get the job from the phone screen. You just need to get the on-site. All right, hopefully that answers that question. That's very real. That's good advice. I know for sure, firsthand. Jor asks, would you be willing to do a video role play showing good versus not so good phone interviews, even on-site ones? Yeah, for sure. We can do that. I think we might do actual sort of mock phone screen ones. And yeah, role play sounds pretty good because that way I could actually demonstrate what are some things that you might not want to do. Let me write that down. Sure. Thank you very much. And thanks for being with us. Okay, next question. Role play bad phone screen scenarios. Okay, I got that. Jor always brings awesome ideas. Jor, I already have a backlog full of stuff that you recommended, and I don't have enough time to get through all of it, but believe me, it's in the backlog. So we're going to get it done. All right, next question. What level of technology awareness is needed for the technical product manager? By the way, guys, we're going to wrap it up. I see this question. I really appreciate all these questions, but they kind of seem to never end. We're going to be wrapping it up pretty soon. So I'm just going to do a few more questions, and then we'll do more of these if you find them valuable. That's what it's all about, right? I want you to find it valuable so that I'm going to continue doing it if that's the case. What level of technology awareness is needed for the technical product manager? Well, I think that all product managers should be, to some degree, technical product managers, especially if you're working in the tech industry, right? If you're working with physical products, you might need to know the specific of those industries. But if you're working in tech, you should have concepts like basic tech concepts understood. How does the internet work? Client server, being able to draw out a process map or the architecture of a product. I was doing an interview with a great candidate that just did a wonderful job answering everything, but then had a little bit of trouble putting together a very precise structure for how to deliver, from an architecture perspective. Okay, where does data live? What data pieces are going to be stored? How are they going to be sent? Where, like the pipeline? So all of those things, the product manager should be able to draw those out, understand what the restrictions, what the usual problems that come along with those types of products, should be able to draw those out and speak to engineers. And I think every product manager in tech should be able to do that. Specifically in terms of other technologies, data analysis, statistics, and of course, SQL is one I usually talk about. and an understanding of user experience, like UX principles and good design principles, and understanding of lots of different emergent technologies could also be useful, about like what are different industries doing, what are different businesses doing. I think that would be helpful. Thank you, Kunwar Padmasri, also for the recommendations. It sounds like there's interest. Sure, good idea. You got product market fit right there. So we'll definitely do those. All right. So let me check this one off. Oliver asks, how can I stand out against experienced PM applicants to jobs if I have no experience? You've got enthusiasm though, right? And you've got time and drive and a true interest and a desire to get into the job because you like the concept. So I think almost with all situations, turn liabilities into assets if you can. You don't have a certain experience in a particular industry, that's okay. You turn that into an asset because you'll have a fresh perspective. And that's, by the way, that's not, that's not nonsense. That's a real thing. Fresh perspective is very valuable because once you do know the stuff, you become entrenched in certain ways of thinking that you don't have that as a newcomer. So that's one way of turning a liability into an asset. Founding startups, businesses, side gigs, side businesses. That's something you can do also because presumably you have a little bit more time on your hands. Also early career, presumably you have a little bit more time on your hands. So do those things. Maybe you don't have to watch that Netflix episode. Maybe you can do this instead. Don't work yourself to the bone. I've done that because burnout is a real thing. But, think about the things that you want to do and to be in the next year, 2, 5 years, and just realize that those things are not going to happen unless you put in the effort. And then the next thing is make sure that effort is impact driven. So you're not just doing things for the sake of doing things. Again, I've done that many times, possibly still do that, but you're taking the actions that are going to move you forward in that metric that you've set up for yourself. So Oliver, that's how you can stand out. You start a business or you join a business and you start doing it as you apply for these jobs. And in the beginning, it'll be 1 month as you start. What are we in now? July. So you started in July. That's 1 month of experience in your new business. But as you keep searching, as you keep looking for new opportunities, and by the way, if you land a job that maybe is not your ideal job, but it's in product management, you're there for a year, 2 years, and you drive impact there. Then before you know it, you'll be joining new companies and bigger companies, and you'll be on your way to those positions that you really want. So again, you got to treat it a little bit as a marathon. Early career people tend to, at least I was extremely short time horizon focused. And so basically, if you zoom out, I say this question, how can I stand out against experienced PMs? You won't even remember it in 5 years, right? If you stay on your path of getting into product management, you won't remember it because you'll get it done. I know that was a little bit of theory. From a practical perspective, I think we covered that right away, right? Just do businesses, get involved in startups, get that product experience. That's the way to do it. And then the other way is you've got a fresh perspective. So those are practical applications. All right. Okay, let me scan these questions a little bit. Prioritization, we talked a little bit about that. A little bit about me, is product management my passion? Well, I like to build stuff and help people. That's consistently throughout my life. That's what I like to do. Just build interesting stuff, ideally, and help people. I really enjoy teaching and helping people. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. So hopefully that answers that question real quick. And let's see what else is here. How's the PM space changed? I think product management is, I could be biased, easily could be biased because that's kind of where I've been for a while. But I think it's a very exciting place to be. And I think that as our world becomes more complex, we're going to need people that have these product manager roles that are trying to figure out, okay, what does any of this mean? How do we chart a path forward? How do we, again, help people more efficiently, better, more meaningfully, et cetera? So I think this is going to be in demand. Like if you think in the next 10, 20 years, it really makes sense. Ali, that's great. That's perfect. I'm glad that I did. Yes, build stuff and help people. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's pretty much my motto. That's pretty short and quick. Oh, North Star metric, Simran, is just a primary metric for your product. It's a lot of times when I ask people about their products, they're going to have a hard time telling me the one metric that is going to make it or break it. What's the key metric you're trying to change? And that's ideally you want to train yourself to think of it in those terms. You can have these what are called product health metrics, which are a whole bunch of other metrics, and you can also have counter metrics, which tell you if you are seeing true data in your North Star, your primary metric. But this North Star metric should be the thing that you're trying to change the most when you build features or when you change your product path. Hopefully that makes sense. So we can also go into North Star a little bit more. And I think I've been meaning to do an episode on metrics, and I just haven't been able to get around to it. Okay, folks, I think we're going to wrap it up. Oliver, real quick, Agile. Yeah, I think Agile is important. It's just the methodology of Agile and Scrum, I think it's important. It's fairly straightforward, but you get it more as you actually do it. There's a lot of like technical aspects of how to actually do it technically, but the philosophical piece of it is you just do the most important things more frequently. So you don't plan everything out in advance, a quarter or a year. You do it little chunks at a time, and you maintain a backlog, and you kind of check your velocity, and you get better and better at estimating. And theoretically, you should never be in a situation where you're developing the wrong thing. You have no product market fit. You've worked on something for 6 months that nobody needs, right? That's what Agile is supposed to help with. So I think it's definitely important to understand what it is, and ideally, like, just try it on. If you're building something for yourself, run a couple of sprints. Read it. There's some basic books on Agile, or even you can just read a guide online that gives you the basic concept. You don't have to implement the whole thing, but just the basic concept. Sprint planning, and then basically retrospectives. And again, if you're working a small team, I think it might be very easy to get started. All right, folks. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. I am going to save these questions because I do want to get to it, but it's unrealistic to be able to get to it today. I think I'm getting hungry. I'm very, very hot. But I thank you very much for coming. Thank you for joining me on this Saturday. And we're going to try to do more of these in the future. In the meantime, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out some videos. They might answer some of the questions that you had in here. And of course, follow me on LinkedIn as well. And also sign up for the newsletter, which I send out every now and then with some news and also updates about events that might be happening like this one. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Deep, Sergey, Zara, Harsha, Kunwar, Ali, thank you so much for being here. Guthwolf, thanks very much. Theodora, very welcome. Thanks, everyone, for being here with me, and I will see you next time.